Hello, my name is Mr. Chieng. Today we want to look at cell physiology. Now, by the end of this chapter, the following objectives should be met. One, the learner should be in a position to state the meaning of cell physiology. Number two, the learner should be in a position to correlate the membrane structure with cell physiology in relation to permeability. Number three, the learner should be in a position to differentiate between diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Number four, the learner should state and describe the factors affecting osmosis, diffusion, and active transport. Then number four, the learner should be in a position to carry out experiments on diffusion, osmosis, active transport, and explain their role in living organisms. Lastly, the learner should be in a position to explain Targa and plasmolysis in terms of osmotic pressure. So the first thing we should start with the meaning of cell physiology. So cell physiology is the study of cell functions. And when we look at cell functions, we have different functions that always takes place within the cell. Now, before we move to that, we should be in a position to understand the definition of the cell. So you find that in the previous chapter, we had learned about the cell, and we said that the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of an organism. So you realize that all the life processes, they always take place at the cell level. And maybe I can give an example or some few examples of the life processes that take place within the cell level. This might include respiration. We might have photosynthesis. We can also have protein synthesis and any other process that take place within the body of an organism. Now, next, we move on to the next thing, and that is you should be in a position to understand that cells always require raw materials for them to carry out these vital processes within themselves. Now, these include the raw materials include the following. We have oxygen, we have carbon dioxide, we also have glucose, then we also have the mineral salts. Now, what is going on is that we need to understand that anytime the cell takes in these raw materials, then in return, by the end of the processes which are taking place, in return there will be the waste materials which will be released from the cell, because when these waste materials are allowed to accumulate within the cells, they may reach toxic levels. So this means that there is always constant movement of materials in and out of the cell. So by this, this ensures that the cell has its life being maintained. So we move on to membrane structure and properties. So you realize that a membrane is a surface structure which encloses cells and its organelle. So you realize that we have a number of membranes in place, and they will always be named according to according to their structure. Now, examples of membranes we have the cell membrane, the tonoplast, the nuclear membrane, the mitochondrial membrane, the chloroplast membrane. So you realize that this membrane, they always have a basic common structure which regulates the flow of materials in and out of the cell. As we learned in the previous topic, again, we had also looked at the structure of the cell membrane, and you realize that it was made up of a double layer of phospholipids with protein molecules which were embedded or attached to the biphospholipid layers. The structure of the cell membrane will always give it its property, and hence enable it to perform its function. Now we are moving on to the next subtopic, and now we look at the properties of the cell membrane. Now we only have three properties of cell membrane, and the first one is semi-permeability. Now when we say that the cell membrane is semi-permeable, then it means that this cell only allows selective movements of materials in and out of the cell. So what does that mean? Materials with smaller molecules of smaller sizes are always allowed to pass across the cell membrane, but the molecules of larger sizes are always not allowed to pass through the cell membrane. So you find that there's a selective movement in that. Only molecules with large particles are allowed to pass through. An example, we can have a cell inside a solution of sugar, a sugar solution. So you find that molecules of sugar, the small molecules of sugar will always be allowed to get into the cell, but the ones with the larger particles will not be allowed to get into the cell. Then another thing is that I add another thing, and that is cell membrane. You realize that with cell membrane, it allows particles to pass through. It allows the molecules to always to pass through, whether it is small or large. So the difference that you need to understand between a cell membrane and cell wall is that in cell membrane, there is selective movement of particles, but in a cell wall, the particles, they just move in and out of the cell, be it having large particles or small particles. Another property is sensitivity to changes in temperature and pH. Now, you realize also that if you look at the structure of the cell membrane, you'll realize that it is made up of protein. And this one means that extreme changes in temperature or pH will always change or alter the structure of the membrane. Hence, it will hinder its normal functioning. The last property we have is that the cell membrane is always polarized, and that one we get it in that you find that on the outer side of the membrane it has a net positively charged, and to the inside we have a net negative charge. So therefore we talk about the cell membrane being polarized. Now, due to this property, it enables, due to these charges which are possessed by the cell membrane, it will always affect the manner in which materials move in and out of the cell. Now, another thing is that due to this property, it enables the cell membrane to detect the changes within the surrounding. Now, this marks the end of our lesson. Let us meet on the next day. So thank you for watching. Hope we will meet in the next lesson. Hope you enjoyed. So you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Charlton Odero